your deer hair bugs. I've got a big hair stacker here. If you want a really dense deer hair bug, you're going to have to grab a generous chunk of deer hair in order to get these flies to be real packed, nice and tight. The one thing that I did not bring was my comb. A bone deer hair comb helps get all of the under fur. See how it's kind of sticking to my fingers? That under fur is almost like dubbing. It'll just absorb water. It'll also keep your fly from spinning and flaring that well. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm holding the tips and I'm coming in and trying to get rid of the short pieces and trying to get as much of that under fur out. Those bone combs are almost like electrostatic. When you run it through, it'll pull all that little stuff out of there. So I'm going to take all those tips and get it down in there. Give it a couple good whacks. Pull some of the rogue super long ones out of there. But you can see a majority of those tips are nice and kind of even now. A lot of times I'll come back through and just trim so you have a proportional piece. Here's where the fun starts. I've got to measure where I want those tips to go, and I want them to go down and kind of ride near the hook, sometimes even kind of covering the hook a little bit. So once you have your measurement there, swap hands. And with a rotary vise, you can put it on top or bottom. But with any deer hair work, I'm going to put the deer hair at a 45 across where I want to tie it in. I'm going to take 2 loose wraps. And when you're putting material on the bottom, I'm going to add pressure, and you see how it flares, but I didn't release with my left hand. And then walk it around. So if I pause there and turn, can you see the brown weed guard in the flat area? Now all the deer hair is on the bottom side of the hook. And if it's not on the bottom side of the hook, or if it's not symmetrical, you can bring your thumb in here and kind of tease it into place. Couple wraps. You're always wrapping over the same area every time. Okay? Now we're going to put some olive, smack it right on top of that. This will be our next color. And I'm going to use this piece because it's got the longest fibers. General rule of thumb when you're stacking deer hair and you're working progressively forward, you're going to use a big chunk on the bottom, and then your next layers of deer hair, that are going to go on top, you're going to do about 50% of the color on top, and then another 25 of the next color, and maybe another 25 of the next color, to get that kind of barring effect. This one will look different. They just use black kind of in lines on here, but still have to get a pretty good generous piece, especially when you're at the back side of the fly, to make sure that that collar is nice and thick. That's going to help this thing swim. So I'm going to get that under fur gone and out of there. I'm going to take that super long one out so it doesn't mess with anybody. You can see how the tips are nice. You have to buy a big one of these for your deer hair work. Your trout size one won't get the job done quite as well. So same thing here. I'm going to come in and just kind of even everything out. This one's a little bit easier because you're going to measure exactly where the white tip's in, and I'm looking where I'm going to tie my thread in, and I'm just going to pinch it there. Whenever you're stacking deer hair, as long as your previous section is bound down nice and tight, all I'm going to do here is unwrap once, lay it right on top, go around once, twice. I'm going to take my thumb and put it right on top of it and my index finger right underneath, and I'm pulling straight towards me with my bobbin and my thread, and I'm putting a lot of pressure on both components at the same time. I'm going to wind through once, twice again, pinch it and lock it into place. So now we have two colors. Now I'm going to take this yellow. I'm going to grab half as much yellow. Hey, Tommy, you should be up here doing this.
I kind of burn out on time here.
You and everybody else on the planet. So those tips were already kind of nice and symmetrical, so I'm not even going to bother putting them in my hair stacker. But same process. Kind of measure, grab, you can unwind one, put it in, pull, 1, 2, then I'm going to do half as much again. With the black. And same thing. I'm going to unwind once, lay it right in there. Just like that. Now I've got to get my thread in front of that big mess of stuff there. So there's a couple different things you can do. You can take some scissors. I like to just separate my colors out a little bit so I can see. You can take your hair packer. What I'm going to do whenever I pack my hair backwards, I'm using my left hand. I'm going to my tie-in point, and I'm pushing just like that, and then you can leave your hair packer, whichever type you prefer. Let me spin this up. Bring it right in front. And if you have some colors that are bleeding through, a lot of times you can still come in and tease them into place. And I'm wrapping right up there, nice and tight. And again, you can come in, if if you've got all the time in the world, you can really make sure you have some good, clean kind of color separation. If there's a couple troublesome ones, you can just clip them and get them out of the way. You can also take a little dab of that glue and put it right in there where the hook point is, or right where it meets the hook, and it'll help keep that material from shifting around a lot. Now when I do these divers, I prefer on this one to have a nice thick section of olive for my collar when I'm doing this. So I'm going to do a real small stack of white and just an olive one in there. You'll see that at the end when I trim it where that collar is. So I'm just going to do a quick one of just white and just olive before we do our next three little sections, and then we'll be ready to trim. Any questions so far? It is a tedious process, but again, still one of the most fun flies I think you can actually fish. Tommy, I was telling them I picked a white saltwater cape out of Nat's stash of stuff that I have, and it's got like an April 7th, 93, and it never been opened.
It's down to line good.
Yep. I was gonna say his deer hair is nice and crispy.
Yeah, I bet.
So I'm just doing a quick white and olive chunk here. And then again, we'll put our rubber legs in after this one. I can't stand this hair packer. Nat Burgwin's hair packer was a broomstick handle with a hole drilled in it, and it works beautifully. But these you can get a lot of pressure to push that material back. All right, wind it in front. Get your colors separated. That's going to make a nice dense collar for this fly. For rubber legs, kind of in the interior of the fly, a couple different ways you can attach them. One way that I've always done it is just make sure you've got enough material. You don't want to start off too short from the get-go. So you can always leave them kind of long, because we can trim them at the end. You can put them against there, you can tie around, but what I do is I tie an overhand knot in mine, like this, and I'll put it there, and I'm going to bring it back, and it'll always be at an angle, but what you're going to ultimately end up doing is kind of tying right around the knuckle of that figure 8 knot. To get it in place, you just want them to ride right on the side, and then I'll kind of draw them through the hair, kind of push them back and keep them out of the way. Then you can come back and really tie that down nice and snug. Here we go. So we're going to do a couple more sections here moving forward. So again, going to grab a very healthy chunk of our bottom color. Remember to get that under fur out. Again, get yourself a nice comb and don't leave it at home.